Welcome to The Invisible Ingredient. I'm your host, Blair Beattie. In every vineyard, there's a quiet conversation happening between leaf and soil, between rain and sunlight, and between the farmer and the land that holds him. For years, that conversation was one of productivity, efficiency, and trust. Trust in the systems, the science, the products, and the promise to make farming easier. But what happens when the things we use on the land begin to harm the life they were meant to sustain? Today's story brings us face to face with that question. Nick Dugmore, or Duggie, is a vigneron, a father, a husband, and a steward of vines, who spent his life working with the rhythms of soil, season, and sun. Recently, he was diagnosed with stage 3 bowel cancer that's now moved to his lungs. And through that diagnosis, he began to look more deeply at the invisible ingredients that have shaped both his land and his life. This is not a story of blame, it's a story of courage, of a man's willingness to face what's difficult and to speak about what so many in agriculture quietly feel. It's a story about love of land, about legacy, and about what it means to farm with our eyes open. As we listen, we're reminded that the health of our soil and the health of our bodies are not separate stories. They are one story written in the same living language. Welcome to The Invisible Ingredient. Nick Dugmore, or Duggie, welcome. It's such a pleasure and honour to be sitting in front of you in this studio today. I've been really looking forward to unpacking a conversation together, and I think will have an audience which is so ready and receptive to your story. And I don't know where we're going to go, but what I do know is that it's going to come from honesty and heart, and thanks for coming all this way.
The pleasure's all mine. I've been so excited about this. This has gotten me so fired up. And just what you guys are doing, you know, spreading awareness and connecting farmers and all that sort of, just building the energy and speaking the truth when it's a very hard time to speak the truth. I'm just honoured to be a part of it.
Yeah, thank you, mate. Well, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but you've certainly put yourself into the cauldron, or the fire, as we may say, and it's shining rather brightly. But before we do, I think it would be really important, and remiss of us not to, is to maybe introduce Duggie to the world. I mean, you're obviously a viticulturalist, a partner and a father, and we met last year, I think, when we were travelling around Australia and were directed towards Stoke Wines. So how did you get to that point? Like when we met...
To Stoke Wines?
Yeah. Like where did it all come from? And tell us a little bit about that story.
It's been a big journey and a really exciting one, roller coaster. But out of school, I actually finished school in Sydney and then did a lot of travel and things, but did wine marketing at university in South Australia. We moved back and forth with my old man's job and did wine marketing. Not that anyone was in the wine game. I just didn't do very well at school. I was sort of there to socialise rather than to learn. And then after I graduated there, travelled the world doing vintages and learning about winemaking and viticulture, and then eventually went back to university and did winemaking. I sort of found what I wanted to do. And we started Stoke Wines. We're only a small wine brand. We had a 12-acre vineyard on Kangaroo Island, but started Stoke in 2016. And then in 2020, when COVID happened, I lost my job at Wirra Wirra in McLaren Vale. They put me on JobKeeper and sort of set me free off to focus on my own business. So that's when Stoke really took off. I just had to lean in then. So it was kind of a silver lining of COVID for me, because I was set free to go and grow this business and really immerse myself in that. But I was just been travelling to Kangaroo Island since I was 11 years old, and going on family holidays. And I just had the most amazing memories of that place. And then in 2008, went on a surf trip with some mates. We were meant to travel Australia 8 months, and we went to KI to be there for 6 weeks, and we ended up just staying the whole time there because the surf was amazing. There was no one in the water. Started playing football over there, and then just started to learn about the place. And I met a family who had a winery, and I started doing sales and marketing for those guys. And that's when I started to learn about Kangaroo Island and believe in the potential that it had as a premium grape growing region. And I just got really excited about that side of things. But so with a big focus on regional development, but I realised that I had to go and develop myself before I could contribute to the reputation of that place as a wine region. So I took off and did vintages around the world, New Zealand and Canada, Bordeaux and France, a couple there. And then I met my wife in New Zealand, working in a winery, and then eventually came back, and the same week that I lost my job at Wira Wira, we took over a vineyard on Kangaroo Island, and we turned it from conventional to organic, because that's when I started to think, because I've always grappled with the fact that we make alcohol, because alcohol causes a lot of problems, but it's the choice of the consumer. But what is not the choice of the consumer is what I use out in the vineyard, the way that I farm. So for me to justify the fact, or the way that I sleep at night, is by farming the right way. Mm-hmm. So the way that I farm, whether you drink our wines or not, doesn't affect you. And that was kind of how I justified myself as a part of the alcohol industry.
Or being a drug dealer, yeah.
Pretty well.
A legal one though.
Yeah. But, people, so now I'm talking a lot about glyphosate, and I get a little bit, people get a little bit funny about the fact that we produce alcohol, but it is the consumer's choice, and and people know that there's alcohol in there, and there's a far bigger issue. Alcohol I think is often the solution for a lot of people as opposed to the problem, and there's deeper cultural and spiritual issues as to why people are drinking so much. Mm-hmm. And we're not addressing those. We're Band-Aid fix, like a lot of the issues to do with herbicides as well.
I'm interested, and there's so much I want to say right now, so much I want to ask, but if we can just frame what would be, so moving from conventional to organic processes, you're a viticulturalist and a viniculturalist all at the same time. Is that correct? Like you grow the grapes and you make the wine.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Just so people are aware of what those
they call it a vigneron is the fancy word for it. Yeah, if you're growing and making.
Okay, nice name.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll put that in my notes. I'll put that in.
Put that on the CV.
Yes.
Sounds fancy.
So if obviously there's a set way from a conventional perspective on how we produce grapes and that go into the wine, what was the pulse or the impulse behind that change to organic?
Well, it was pretty much.
Was it guilt?
Yeah. No, it was. Well, just wanting to contribute or not contribute in a detrimental way, and when I'm talking about our wines or selling our wines, I'm never talking about what you're going to taste. It's so subjective. When we bite into the same steak, are we tasting the same thing? I don't even know. How do we know? So I make wines the way that we like to make them, and if people like them, then I'm happy for them. But the way that we affect their life is the way that we farm. I kind of think of life now as just a giant bowl of soup, and we're all in that soup. And if you were to put a few drops of poison on one side of it, and I was to show you that, would you eat from the right side of it, the other side of it? You'd be a little bit cautious, wouldn't you? You wouldn't want to go near that. It's being contaminated. And that's kind of the way that I view the world now and life. There is one life, and we're all a part of it, and we need to respect that. And that's what I like to reflect in our viticulture. But the things that we did in viticulture, it was more, our regenerative agriculture was more about what we stopped doing really first. And the same thing when I had health issues as well. I had to cut all those things out first, and that's quite a risky part of it and it's quite scary, you know, because you don't know what's going to happen as well. So there's a lot of risk there, and I have empathy for people who have the courage to go for it and do that. The first year that we took over that vineyard from 15 acres, we only got 3 tons of grapes. So I had to buy fruit from others, and then I had to figure that out financially, how to go about it. I still remember pulling the nets on the vineyard and then not being any fruit there, but my ego didn't allow me to not put the nets on. But that cost us $4,000 to do that job when I should have pulled the pin on it, you know, but I just had to keep going, had to finish that off. And then we got 3 tons of grapes. We should have been selling our wines for $120 a bottle at that point for that vintage. You know, so yeah, it's a difficult transition, but for me, and my knowledge of all this has expanded massively since getting sick, but it just felt like the right thing to do from the start. If we were going to be in that viticulture side of things, because it was all winemaking before that, and we would buy fruit from growers, then I wanted to be doing it the right way.
Mm-hmm. If we zoom out, how many organic growers, biodynamic growers or people in the industry that are doing things in a different way, that are minimising their reliance on all these agrochemicals and sides in their practices, is that still a vast minority, or are you seeing that there's some growth there, there's some potential there?
I don't know about growth, because the consumer doesn't place the value on organics to what it deserves, I think. But I think that's going to happen. We're kind of forced. We're being forced into it. People are slowly realising that we must do it that way. Unfortunately, it's going to become a need rather than a want, you know. And then there's people greenwashing and people accused of just doing it so they can get the organic label. But McLaren Vale is the most organic wine region in Australia, and that's 30% organic. Kangaroo Island, most of the people are farming organically over there. But being an island, being very windy as well, because vines shouldn't really even grow in Australia. Half of them are sprayed 5 to 15 times a season. And a lot of people, when they're using glyphosate, they're spraying under vine so that you're not getting the grass growing up through the canopy and affecting airflow. So Kangaroo Island's quite an easy spot to grow organically. Well, not easy, but easier, especially if you've got the right soil composition as well, soil health, which for us just came with time, with not doing much. And it kind of regenerated itself.
Nature has its ways. Huh?
Yeah, and then the following year we got 23 tonnes. So first year, 3 tonnes. Second year, 23 tonnes. And now we're consistently in the mid-30s from it. And the vines look really nice and balanced. There's so much more life there. There's a lot of mice. There's a lot of tiger snakes. There's a lot of everything, you know, and it just feels cared for and it feels alive. There's a regenerative... the first regenerative organic certified vineyard in Australia is in McLaren Vale, and we took some Shiraz from that year and went and picked it, and you could even feel the mood of the picking team was up because there was life there. You could hear all the animals in there, and they were having some disease. I can't remember what it was, but they had wasps come in and sort it out. You know, it's like a natural balance that came in and dealt with a pathogen, and it was gone not long after.
That is the agricultural story, right? Like we're so, that playbook of monoculture, which in itself is not diverse and not resilient, and is why we have to rely on these other chemicals and sides, whether it be insecticides, pesticides, fungicides, rodenticides, whatever they may be, that we have to use, because there isn't exactly what you're speaking to, which is that beautiful diversity. When you've invited nature back in to play a role. And that role can be one of sorting stuff out, healing, and also reacting to a challenge, as you've just described. What It must feel quite amazing to have watched that transition of your vines, and then to visit that today and feel the change, and also feel really confident in a future because you're getting great yields, and it's sort of doing it itself. Like I get a sense that there's less worry and more harmony.
Yeah, definitely. Well, now after going through what I've been through, we're not managing the vineyard anymore. But the guy who's taken over is farming organically as well, and they sprayed twice last year. Mm-hmm. And when we first took over, because we were in a bit of a transition period, I sprayed 11 times. So that's massive. You think about, well, for me, it was ferry trips over to over to Kangaroo Island as well. The cost of that, the time, the diesel, the compaction on your soil as well. So many different things. I kind of relate agriculture to mental health as well. You know, it took us a long time to acknowledge mental health issues. And it's really, you know, and now we can speak about it publicly, and it's a lot easier for people to talk about it, but it's so hard to recognize because you can't see it. And with soil health is the same thing. You can't see soil health. And when you put in your macronutrients, you see a vine on top booming, and it's lush and it's green, and you've got the grapes there, but underneath it's dead. You know, so as soon as you take the human away, that vine is really going to struggle. So you have to maximum inputs into that place. But the same thing with mental health. You can have a mate who's they look great, and when you catch up, they're fine, but you know, on the inside, they're struggling. And often it happens when people take their own lives. You don't even know, and then it's happened. So it's been a really difficult one for people to fathom. But the same thing with soil health. You can't see it. So we have to use to an extent our imagination to understand the life that is under there, you know, and what that life is truly doing for us as humans, but then also in the wine industry for our wines. Mm-hmm. It was one thing I learned about early on, because I was trying to figure out what caused my illness, and I was taking a lot of Nurofen at the time because I had a bulging lower disc. I was having a lot of pain. And when you take Nurofen, it blocks off your body's ability to send down prostaglandins to the area, which is what gives you the pain. It makes you feel sore, and that's why Nurofen works. It just stops that. But what's going down with those prostaglandins as well is a whole lot of micronutrients and a whole lot of communication in the body to stop that swelling, to create the swelling, but then also to help you heal. And the same thing happens with a vine when you give it nitrogen. The following year, you know, they're smart. They're smarter than we think. The following year, it's thinking, why would I bother trying to produce my own nitrogen? Why would I bother going and developing a relationship with mycorrhizal fungi when I'm about to get my hit of nitrogen in a minute? So why waste all that energy and put that somewhere else? And same thing, I use this analogy because my mum's a lactation consultant. It's the same thing with a breastfed baby. The breastfed baby has to work for the letdown. You know, they're connecting with the mother, they're crying, which is a form of communication. So then the mother's body releases whatever it needs to release to enable the letdown. But the baby has to work for it. So then when you're like, oh, I can't be bothered, and give the baby a bottle, then the next time the baby is not going to want to go back on the boob. It's like, well, I easily got the bottle, didn't even have to latch, didn't have to work for the letdown, didn't have to do all these things, and I got a great feed. But it's missing out on a lot of micronutrients that we need to be human and for resistance against pathogens in the future. You know? So the same thing, through this journey, I've realised that we pretty much are a plant. We're just not connected by roots to this place.
Yeah, we're so full of other creatures that we're only just sort of understanding. And those chemicals that we use in our food system have a dramatic effect on those creatures that internal creatures that we rely so heavily on for our immune function, for our gut function. I guess it's a good time to maybe open up about what you've put out there into the world recently. Much courage, humility, honesty. Like your story has been and will continue. It sounds as if will continue to be, because we're talking about strapping on and being warriors in this day and age to share our truth and our experience so we can be of service to others and create the awareness required. So I'd love to maybe just allow you to unravel in your health journey, because it's as hard and challenging as that is. It's also been, from what I've witnessed, an amazing
awakening,
catalyst of awakening, right? And what I hear from you these days and what you've just recently put out into the world has given permission to others and has opened up a conversation that we've needed to have for some time. So I'm going to pass the baton to you to share how it all came about from your perspective, and what are some of the insights that you've been able to be gifted post the diagnosis and this continued journey of healing.
Yeah, it was pretty nerve-wracking putting that video out. And just so people know, I was diagnosed when I was 39. I'm 41 now, so 2 years ago I was diagnosed with stage 3 bowel cancer. So I had a 5 centimetre tumour in my upper rectum, which had gone through the bowel wall, and it was in 3 lymph nodes that they could see, so most probably in some more. But yeah, it was a massive curveball and changed my life completely. And from diagnosis from when they found out that the tumour was there till I found out the extent of it, because they do a scope, a colonoscopy, and they find the tumour, but then you don't know where else that might be in your body. And it was 8 days before I knew whether I had a chance at living or not. So that period, I'll be forever grateful for that period, because it was just every emotion under the sun, and there was a massive amount of crying and fear, but there was also so much love. I called every friend that I knew, kind of saying goodbye. But when I went into the Royal Adelaide Hospital and I met my bowel surgeon, they team you up with somebody, he gave me the diagnosis, and then he told me that he believes that my tumour is about 16 months in size. And this is because I don't want people just to think that I've chosen glyphosate to pick on, because like everybody else, I've used it and I believe that it was harmless, like they say. But what he did when he told me those words is gave me a starting point for me to research, because I went back 16 months and I was thinking, what happened at the time? And I was actually in our vineyard over on Kangaroo Island, and I got a rash, and it started on my forehead, and then it expanded over my back, and then eventually I had to go home because it was too itchy to even function. And I didn't sleep for 6 nights, and the rash lasted about 6 weeks until it faded away. But on day 4, my face was so swollen that we decided we better go to emergency, and went in there, and they put me in a glass box because they thought I had monkeypox. It was at the time of monkeypox. So they chucked me in this glass box, and then they tried to figure out what it was, and they said it was a spider bite with an overreaction from my immune system, but there was no spider bite at the time. But also, so I thought, oh, the rash has caused my cancer. It was in my mouth and it was in my bum, so it was internal. But then I remembered the hot showers that I was having at the time. So I was having 8 to 10 hot showers, completely draining our 400-litre hot water tank every day, and it was the most phenomenal feeling I've had in my life. I'd take the shower head off and just put it over every part of my body, and I was getting this incredible release and relief, the only relief that I could get throughout it. And then I'd have a cold shower at the end, and the rash would calm down for about an hour, and then I'd be back up itching for the rest of until I had my next shower. But I was properly addicted. So then I thought, well, what is it causing that sensation, which led me to serotonin And so I started researching serotonin. And the majority of serotonin, 90% of it is in your GI tract, the gut lining in your GI tract. And 10% is released from the brain. A lot of people think it's just from the brain because, I don't know, you see your brain as the main organ and that's where you think that's where the feel-good hormones come from. So I thought, maybe it's got something to do with that, and then started researching serotonin more. And serotonin is made up of 3 essential amino acids, tryptophan, tyrosine, and phenylalanine. And those 3 amino acids are made in the shikimate pathway. And the shikimate pathway is what glyphosate disrupts. So I was thinking, why don't I have serotonin, or why is this massive release of serotonin cause my cancer? I looked up research papers, serotonin and cancer, and lack of or excess of can lead to the development and progression of tumours. And that's what led me to glyphosate. So all that research, and it sort of sent me on the path, and then I started going down that rabbit hole.
And it's quite the rabbit hole, because there's still so many different stories out there, subject to where you look and what you uncover. So as you went down that pathway, what else uncovered for you as far as what this molecule is and is capable of? And how did you, that causative pathway that you've been investigating, was what you found challenging? Was what you found illuminating? And how have you then been able to sort of digest the reality of how this chemical's used and why it's still being supported?
Yeah, it was challenging. It was kind of exciting at the same time, because it was nice to have my relationship with my own ego has developed a lot over this period as well. But it was really nice to have something to blame my cancer on as well, because that's a tough part, because you start to wonder, why me? And you go through that phase of anger. And I still remember being in the winery bottling wine in that first 2 weeks, because we had a lot of wine in tank. We needed to bottle them, so we had something to sell, because I was going to be out of action soon doing chemotherapy and radiotherapy. And I still remember yelling, "Fuck cancer," at the top of my lungs. I was just so angry, stuck in that phase. So to get that information and for my research to slowly develop towards blaming something else other than myself was kind of exciting as well. But then when I really properly went down that rabbit hole to understand the extent of glyphosate was pretty scary too. But the shikimate pathway was a big one, because in the 1970s, when it was released, it didn't even have to do a toxicology report because of the shikimate pathway. People believed that only plants had the shikimate pathway, and us humans, we didn't have it. And since then, gut science has come so far, and they've realised that we are more than 50% bacteria and fungi, and of that 50% bacteria and fungi, 54% of it use the shikimate pathway. And it's used for hormones and proteins and neurotransmitters and all these different things that are being affected, or your body's ability. So maybe when my cancer took off, my body could have gone and sorted it out when it was microscopic, but my body wasn't able to communicate and go down and sort out that inflammation at the time when what the immune system is designed to do and has the capability to do was meant to do it. But it just kept going further and further from there, because, to properly understand any topic, I feel like you've got to be a bit of a historian of it as well. So I started to dive into that, what was glyphosate before it was a herbicide, and you find out that it was an industrial pipe cleaner, and it's a chelator, because it is a chelator, and it's binding up all these little micronutrients, these metal ions in the soil, so that a plant can't use it. And not doing the guy who researched it initially, Don Huber, saying that plants would get sicker the following years, mainly because it's binding up manganese, which is used for stability of the sheath around a plant, kind of like the structure of its outer shell, I suppose. Could explain it that way. But it was weakening plants and therefore making them less resistant to pathogens. And then we ingest that. So it just kind of kept going on and on from there, and then start learning about how much is actually being used and where it is. They're finding it in water and food, and starting learning about the GMOs in the 1990s as well, and using glyphosate as a desiccant, so directly into our food system. But then you learn about the corruption, which is, for a cancer patient, is so disheartening. My first insight into corruption in my healing journey was finding out that American oncologists earn 30% of their wage through issuing chemotherapy. And I just about had a panic attack, and I was seeing my oncologist the next day, and I asked her if she was earning any money on the drugs that she was giving me. She said, no, we don't do that in Australia. So that was a relief. But just the fact that it happens somewhere was so disheartening. And then you think, well, what else is going on as well? And then you start to learn about, I've looked into the history of agriculture, because to understand why we farm the way that we farm and why we eat the way we eat, you kind of got to understand the history of it. And eating a lot of these things that we eat now has only been around for 15,000 years, and really 9,000 years since the invention of the plough, which enabled all these people to farm a little broader and farm some different things and sort their weeds out that way. But then, nobody understood what soil health was as well. They're just trying to go on the results of what they get. And then there was a lot of land, this is thousands of years ago, there's a lot of land that you can expand into. So you deplete what you've got and then move on. And you can see, I've got a book called Dirt, The Erosion of Civilizations. And you just see how humans moved around the planet with their ability to look after or deplete soil, pretty much. There's some places that lasted longer, and they're mainly on the banks of rivers where it would come down and naturally build up. It would flood every now and then and naturally build up with more nutrients for those plants. So it's quite fascinating to see the way that through evolution, how we've developed based on our ability or inability to look after soil health. And now we're here and, trying to feed the planet, when really to feed is to nourish. And at the moment, we're not nourishing people, we're simply filling stomachs. Mm-hmm. And that's evident by the increase of bowel cancers up nearly 300% in 30 years. And prostate cancer is more than that. Lung cancer is up. But then autism is off the charts.
Autoimmunes.
Everything's going up. And there's a teenager diagnosed with bowel cancer the other day. And then I start wondering, well, at what point do we need to start acknowledging this? Do we need a 9-year-old to get bowel cancer? This is a 70-year-old person's disease normally when the immune system can't keep up. But now the toxicity of the planet is far exceeding our ability, the ability of our immune system to combat that. Because chronic illness, I think, requires chronic health. And if you're slowly getting chipped away at with absolutely everything that you do, and then we really, I think, actually one thing I've learned, we don't know what health is. We're confused. And anything you find in all that information about, like anything I research and find, you can find the complete opposite. I started vegetarian, now I'm on a keto diet. That's how much I've changed when I start to learn about what health really is. I feel like I'm getting there, but there's still so much conflicting information.
It is quite a confusing dichotomy out there. Mm-hmm. And it's all based on what are we watching and where are we getting our information. And I guess part of the reason why we're doing this podcast is to stimulate awareness around, who's telling you what? Yeah. And where are you getting your information from? Because it's obvious to us, and I think probably to you now, is that what we've relied on and our trusted sources of information need to be put into question because of the collusion and the corruption and as we spoke earlier about the money and the power that's involved in controlling the way we produce food and health. It's all interconnected, and we unfortunately are realising the disease that's been created by these ways of production that only consider productivity and profitability.
Yeah, it's pretty disheartening. A little example of that for me, because I believe cancer is death by 1,000 cuts, and it's almost a situation of the perfect storm, except the storm doesn't have to be so perfect these days. But a small cut, for example, is I went to my radiotherapy place, the place where I had radiotherapy on the tumour in my bowel, and when you do radiotherapy, your skin can dry out. So they give you some moisturiser when you go in, when you get your talk about what to expect and all these things. 25 sessions over 5 weeks with the weekends off. And they gave me this moisturiser. And by this point, I'm researching what I'm doing to my body and putting on my body and all these different things. And I turn it over and they've got 2 carcinogens in there, polyparaben and methylparaben. And I said to the lady, well, you've got 2 carcinogens in the moisturiser that you're giving out. And she said to me, oh, it's such a small amount that it won't affect you. And I said, I've already got cancer. And then I filled out a form for management. I said, this is, if nothing else, this is a bad look for your business. But this is one of the main places in South Australia where you go to get radiotherapy. So if we're constantly, if you wake up and you put your makeup on or you put sun cream on or you wash your hair with something with parabens in it or all these things and you're cleaning your teeth with this, it's all, your immune system should be able to deal with it, but there's just so much now that it's death by 1,000 cuts. But then the big ones is glyphosate. People are talking about, and then psycho-emotional as well, of course. But a big one is glyphosate because it breaks down the protein structure in your stomach lining, and people are, there's a lot of microplastics are getting a lot of hype at the moment, and as they should because they're entering into our bodies. But glyphosate is allowing this to enter into our body. And then psycho-emotional, I've got another book called The Gut-Mind Connection, and it's relatively new science talking about how your gut really is your first brain, and your gut is communicating with your brain all the time. But when you put glyphosate in there and it's broken down and you've got leaky gut, then you start to lose the ability to communicate. And then you see figures like farmers are 94% more likely to commit suicide. And you start wondering, well, are they just stressed? But stress in agriculture is just, it's part of it all, it's been around for thousands of years. I know there's a lot of pressure on them because the margins are a lot smaller at the moment, but, perhaps they're disconnected at the level of the gut, leading to more mental health issues and the feeling of being trapped and then wanting to get out. There's a lot of pressure.
But there's, that pressure, and when we have exposure to these disruptive chemicals that are affecting our gut, then we can't even equate to what the effect that might be having, and double downing on the health and wellness of our farming communities and for us in general, right? Mm-hmm. We're seeing all this in real time. I think we all know people that are suffering in whether it's their biology or mentally or spiritually at this point in time. I'm wondering, Duggie, like your journey is one that takes a lot just to walk that path. What is it that is driving you to offer it to the world? Like I've put myself in your shoes, and I'm not sure what I'd be doing at this time. I might be in full, I just need to heal myself and push everything away. You're doing that, but in the process, you've opened yourself up to the world to share your journey and your story. What is it that's sitting behind that for you? Like, where is this crazy drive coming from?
It's to do with purpose, I suppose. But I just, like, my mind has been absolutely blown through this process just multiple times, just of what it is to be human. You know, we're so excited and obsessed with AI and all these other things when all you just have to do is look at a human being. It's just the most phenomenal thing to be here and to have awareness. Like, you think about anything that's incredible in the world, but just the fact that you can think it is incredible and realize the beauty in it is the most amazing part, I think. And I've realized that through cancer, through a level of suffering. That's where I've wound up. But before that, I just wanted to be the best winemaker in the world. And I wanted Kangaroo Island to be a known wine region. And then looking back, it's just so ridiculous. Cancer has really helped me to decipher human concept and what it is to be human. You know, and there's so many things that are just made up crap, like regions, and it's a hard one for people to wrap their head around. But after a while, I was thinking, well, Kangaroo Island's just completely made up. I know it's there, it's an island, and it's doing all that stuff, but somebody just called it Kangaroo Island, and then I'm out there trying to promote it so that it's better than McLaren Vale or better than another wine region. You know, when what really matters is the soil within all those places, because we pretty well are the soil. But for me, this journey, that was my purpose at that time. And then when I got cancer, my purpose became soil health, and then my cancer came back and I realised that I was getting it wrong again, and my purpose became something that only us humans have the ability to do, and that is to witness beauty. So now I'm just floating through life, having a fucking ball. I'm just having the greatest time. And I feel so happy and appreciative of the fact that I have life. So happy about that it's made me want to go and fight for life, you know? And glyphosate is cutting life off at one point. Life is only one thing we've got to realise. We share life. There is only one life. We share it. If we cut it off at one point, it's going to stop the flow. And we are, judging by all the numbers and everything of chronic diseases and suicides and all these things, we're cutting it off at one point. We're not acknowledging the fact that we are a part of it. But that was another thing my wife and I did. Sorry, a little side note. We went to a calm birthing course before we had our son, Finley. And the lady there, she said to all of us, we're the only mammal on planet Earth that has the intellectual capacity to convince ourselves that we can't give birth. And then when you, and that's an evolutionary defense mechanism, because when you're giving birth in the cave and the saber-toothed tiger rocks up, adrenaline is released and two muscles at the base of the uterus engage, and they hold the baby in there so that you can get rid of this threat, and then you can go and find a spot to lay down and have the baby, and then the big muscle at the top will start contracting again. But then it's made me realise that we're the only humans with the intellectual capacity to separate ourselves from nature. We just don't acknowledge the fact that we are part of this place, which is a massive, it's massively to our detriment. I think it's like us versus nature.
It's the mythos we told ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we have the current mythos for this time, especially Western colonised world, is that we have dominion over. Like we're this end point of an evolutionary process, the pinnacle of an evolutionary process.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and what does that grant us? It grants us dominion over the earth to do as we please and utilise that for our own gain, whatever that is. I find it really challenging to accept that we are the end point of an evolutionary process.
I wish that'd be exciting. Imagine that.
You know, exactly. Imagine that. It doesn't quite make sense to us, but we exist within that framework of understanding and belief, and that's our story of separation, as you've just spoken about. Like, that is probably sitting at the heart of, like, glyphosate's a metaphor of that story of separation in a way, and the way that we tend to do things is, we don't acknowledge, and we don't even believe that we are part of nature. We see it as something to fear. We see it as something to extract from. So that invitation was what I'm hearing from you, is in this process that you're evolving through currently, is allowing you to really embody the connection to, like, you seem to be living a bigger life than you ever have, without fear, without judgment, without all those divisive kind of influences that stop us from really fully being human.
And with maximum presence, that's been the biggest thing that I think has changed in my life. To know that, like, right now is the only thing that really exists. So I need to put myself in that, stop separating myself mentally. You know, there's massive breakthroughs being made in the medical world as well, and just understanding the power of the mind, which is also can be to our detriment too, because you can manifest your own diseases if you want. It's actually that powerful. That people are understanding. The last 2 years I've been learning. It's like learning a whole new language, listening to the science and reading the stuff that I've been reading to try and properly understand glyphosate, but then also just biology and everything else that affects us. So, because for me to survive long term, so people know that cancer is back in my lungs. I've got 4 little lumps. One of them we've done radiotherapy on because I'm too scared not to, as well. And then the other 3 are stable. But I've just been learning about what it is to be healthy and trying to understand what that is. I think a lot of people think that being healthy is just not being sick. But it just doesn't work that way. You know, you have to work on it, and you have to look after yourself, and you have to constantly chip away. And now even more so, because we have to combat the increasing level of toxins in our world. I get worried about becoming, a conspiracy theorist and people thinking you're some kind of hippie or something, but it's just, put in a box. But then you realise, language is also a human concept. Somebody made that up at one point. And then what I say and what you say divides us. So I really don't want people to judge me for that, because I'm just so excited about life and pro-life. I just want people to be enjoying their ability to be aware while they're here and understanding that this place is epic.
This place is, life is precious, right? And I think it's probably a beautiful time when we consider that, is to talk about what's possible. Like, you're a vigneron, and will continue to be one, I'm imagining. But what?
Maybe not.
Yeah. Okay. But what do you feel is from even a wine perspective or just a health perspective? Where do we need to go, and what do we need to look at as the fundamentals of shifting how we respond to life and how we're able to show up in the best versions of ourselves in what is a really challenging time to be on earth?
For me, it changed a lot in the 2-year journey since diagnosis. But ultimately, I started to view myself as an animal, and if I stripped away this human concept, like, living in a house, what would I actually be doing? Or not wearing clothes, what would I be doing? I'd be getting a lot of sunlight, and then you start looking into sunlight and realise the benefits of that at different times of the day. Of course, you don't want to get burnt, but our understanding of sunlight in Australia, we're all scared of it. when 94% of people who get melanoma are vitamin D deficient. So I think that fact alone, the theory is people get melanoma because they're burnt as a child, and then it shows up when they're an adult as a cancer. But then you also learn that every cell in our body regenerates every 7 years. So, they're a new person biologically 5 times before they get that cancer. So how does that theory, and you ask the professionals the question, and they can't really answer it. Or my lung specialist at the RA, he couldn't tell me how cancer fuels itself. And there's been no mention of metabolic health at all. When you look at the history of cancer and people's theory around cancer, and cancer being genetic took up a long period of that history. And they've now discovered that cancer is about 5% of cancers are genetic and 95% are environmental and to do with your mitochondrial health. So health on a metabolic level, which is changed a lot also because of the technology that we have in medicine. We can look at a subatomic level and start to understand. Sort of this journey made me realise that we are just scratching the surface of what it is to be a human as well. And then realising the power of the mind too. Because everybody, when you get cancer, people ring up and say, be positive, be positive, be positive. And it's a really cliche thing to say, but it is just so crucial that you need to be positive. I've decided that this cancer is not going to kill me. I've decided when unless I'm in a car crash or something, I'm going to decide when I'm going to die. That's how I feel in this journey now, which has also enabled me to release fear, which because I get a lot of phone calls now, people who have been diagnosed with cancer, and you're in that first period where you're really scared. And a lot of people, I know people who have had cancer and they haven't even told their extended family. They just keep it in their little bubble. They don't want to bother anybody. I was completely the opposite. I put it right out there and I was fishing for love the whole time, But I knew that love was going to bring me energy, so I just wanted it. I just went out and got it.
It sounds like that we get an opportunity via your story to redefine what health really is, from what you're learning and what you're doing and how I'm witnessing this incredible unfolding of humility and brevity and courage and honesty. It feels like you've been able to redefine what health is to you. How can and what is it that you can relay to people that might be listening in some of your learnings and some of your insights? I know you said previously on the car on the way down that you're looking at working with a GP to build a protocol for people in similar situations that you're in. I know that what you're doing is actually giving permission for so many others that consider or have been too afraid to voice or consider that they might have been harmed from chemical exposure throughout their story. So what resonates most with you about something to impart on those people? Because they're welcome at our table, right? And the more that we can have these conversations, the more that we can give support to the people that are in these sometimes, tragic situations, your voice will be somewhat authentic to what's possible and what they could be considering.
Yeah, it was a funny feeling when I first got diagnosed with cancer and I was in that first 8 days. I remember walking up to the servo and feeling like people were looking at me differently. But there was no difference, It was a psychological thing, which was strange because I got a little taste of what it is to be a minority, I suppose, because that's just the way that I felt when I'm a middle-aged, white, privileged guy. And you feel very lonely in that moment. I didn't really know anybody with cancer. But friends were saying, I've got a friend with cancer. Do you want to talk to them? And I was like, yes, please. Bang, bang, bang. And I spoke to so many people very quickly who had cancer. And just to hear their voices was so encouraging because they were still alive. You know, I was like, shit, yeah. And then you hear of a devastating cancer and the person is still alive. They're doing really well, you know. So to talk to people is just crucial. Same thing with mental health, same thing with any of these things. We're all here for each other and we all want to gift our energy to each other. You know, so that was important for me. I went fishing for it and people felt good giving it back. But my advice is also, it's incredibly overwhelming. Whatever you find, you'll find the opposite. So to get a team together and, you know, some immediate family members, it'll be your partner, and try and get some doctors and use them as your filter. So whatever you hear and learn about, you pass it through them. But then also to start viewing yourself as the animal that you really are is so crucial. You know, before cancer, I'd hear about grounding, people getting the energy from the earth, and I'm like, yeah, whatever, come on, you know. But then you do some research and you realise that we are electromagnetic beings and we are actually taking protons and electrons through your body. My science on this thing is terrible, but you read these things, you start learning these things and you realise that, oh, we are so much a part of this place. So understanding that, and that Mother Nature has got you, you are Mother Nature, to have the strength and the compassion for yourself will help to bring you out of fear. But also, modern medicine is incredible as well. You can't take away from that. Like, I think it's got a checkered past from what I've researched as well, which is also disheartening for a cancer patient. But it's still, I think you want a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B, combine it and then make up your own sort of protocol from that. I've got mine, but it's not going to work for everybody. But one of the most important things is that you own your decisions. So if you decide to do chemotherapy, then you do it, and you do it with confidence and without fear where possible. But easily the most powerful thing is to get control of your own mental health. Meditation has been a massive one for me. That's by far, and that's also, I decided to do that at the start because it wasn't putting any drugs in. It wasn't doing anything. It was purely to do with the mind. So I knew that it was complementary. I knew that there was not going to be any adverse effect from me trying to focus on being positive, like everybody would say, you know. And your body reacts on a cellular level. You start to resonate and you start to heal.
And reconnect.
Yeah, be present.
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be my advice for people who get, who find themselves on this journey. And then, of course, to detox as much as you can. You want to be eating organic. You want to do anything and everything that is complementary. And if you choose an alternative path as well, just own it. Go for it. Do the research. Understand the science. There's a tricky thing with science is it's so staunchly objective that I think it has stripped away our ability to be human a little bit, to trust our own intuition. You know, how are you feeling? To listen to your body. Meditation is amazing for that. When it came back in my lungs, it was because of a business falling out, I believe. I said to my wife, I feel like my cancer is coming back. And then when it came back, it was in my lungs. And during meditation, I felt like I could feel something. And I went and I booked the scans in myself, and I got scans of my lungs. And the lung guy said to me, you wouldn't have been able to feel them, they're so small. And I said, well, have you had lung cancer? And he hadn't. I said, well, I reckon I felt them. You know, I was listening to my body. There's something going on.
Yeah, that's a beautiful reflection of what reconnection truly is, right? And what you're talking about, I think, can be an invitation for us all to start feeling into, our food, how does that making us feel? What is it that I'm eating? Like, the unfortunate reality is that these catalyzing moments where people change the way that they eat food or look at themselves or care for themselves come after something catastrophic.
Mm.
So what I'm sensing from you is an opportunity for those tuning in to look at those changes, which are, not that hard, before the cataclysm, before the tidal wave, because our current trajectory around toxins in our food system, it might take a generation for us to move that, but we need everyone on board. And when people have that realization and go on that adventure, the rewards are not just for us. The rewards come for our kids and future generations. Like, the way that the food that we eat has a profound effect on the planet we leave. So in your journey, there's the invitation, but that's not just for those that are suffering from a health challenge. It's for everyone.
Preventative.
Yeah, and just leaving a legacy of possibility for our kids.
Yeah, and I've realised with all that, then our strongest tool is these sort of things, is education. And at home we've now got 7. I built these things during my chemotherapy. It was kind of my fitness. I'd go out there and sweat it up, building some wicking beds, 7 wicking beds out the front of our house that we were going to turn into a lawn. And I'm so glad we've done what we've done. And not that we're feeding our family completely from these things, but it's the lessons for our 2 children, because they get out there. We've done a little greenhouse for them, and they grow them from seed, and then they put them into the wicking beds and they grow it. And then when they finally get to eat it, there's so much joy, and they're so proud of themselves for growing it. And you can taste the effort that went into it, and you can taste, which is nutrition, because it's from healthy, trustworthy soil. You can taste the difference. So through evolution, we've been given these 5 senses, which maybe are a little bit too restrictive for some, but we got taste for a reason. You can taste nutrition. So your body's like, oh, I'm craving that. I want that. At one point, I couldn't eat fruit because I couldn't digest the skins of fruit because of the chemotherapy. It would mess my stomach up so much. So I was just passing the whole skins and blueberries and things out the other end. But at one point, my body just craved it. I just needed those carbs. I needed that sugar so badly, and it was like my body took over, and I just went to the fruit bowl and smashed all this fruit. It was talking to me, to say, you go and get this. You're dying. And I was dying because of chemotherapy, And then a big focus for me, because I embraced chemotherapy. I did it. It was horrible. But that whole time, I was focusing on regenerative health. What am I going to do after I've hammered myself? Because it's practically glyphosate for your body. It doesn't discriminate, It'll get the cancer, but it will get all of your good cells as well. My hands peeled off. It was like gloves of skin peeling off my hands, completely gone, and the soles of my feet peeled off twice. And I couldn't go in the cold section of the supermarket because I was too sensitive. It would be too painful. I had to wear gloves to get eggs and milk and stuff out of the fridge. And then you couldn't taste as well, which is nerve-wracking for a winemaker. But there were all these things going on, and I just kept reminding myself, if this is happening here, imagine what's happening to the tumour. But it was damaging, and who knows what that might do in the long term. But then my focus became on regenerative health. And I think it's a good analogy for the way that we're farming at the moment. At the moment, we're all just hammering ourselves with chemotherapy, and we think it's good, but it's damaging all these other things that are good as well. I suppose there is a way that you can use it. You can, if we're not going to get rid of it completely, because we can't do that overnight, you know. So we can manage the ways that we are using it. Most definitely do not use it as a desiccant. You know, we can do lots of little things to limit the amount, at least in the short term, with a long-term goal of getting rid of it. But like anybody who's got a massive problem, like an alcoholic, you can't sort yourself out until you have that big conversation with your ego in the first place and say, I am an alcoholic. And unfortunately, it often comes when the person has crashed their car and killed their family, or they've been locked up in jail because they've gotten a fight, or worse, they're killed, you know. But it takes something really significant level of suffering to admit that you've got a problem. And we just can't do that here in Australia because we can't wait till we get to that point. Like, how many teenagers need to get bowel cancer before we properly acknowledge that this thing is doing serious damage? Of the 1,000 cuts, this is up there in the top 2 or 3, you know, or maybe even the number 1 when you start realizing where it is, where it's got into.
Everything. I think it's a really good opportunity for us to talk about, because I spent a couple of years traversing the country and sitting with farmers and in farming communities, and I got to see the vast swathes of land that are under, you know, agrochemical inputs, and met lots of the people utilising those. And I think it's important as we evolve this story together, this glyphosate agrochemical story, and bring the awareness that we require to as many people as possible, is reminding them that this isn't a witch hunt, right? This is not pointing fingers at people that are utilising these chemicals in the playbook of agriculture at this point in time, which, you know, conventional agriculture is upwards of 90% of how we produce our food. So we come with this with not judgment, but just care.
Compassion.
Mm-hmm. Because I met so many people that essentially are told or born into how to farm. And what we're trying to do is create healthy awareness, offer permission to question, and then build the pathways to transition. But we know that takes time. And for everyone, it's different, and we have to acknowledge where everyone is at in this process, this rather big systemic and cultural process. So we've got to be really careful not to play the blame game, because it's a really rich one in our culture. Mm-hmm. And we've got enough division in our relationships already. So I'd love for you to speak to that. I know it's really important to you, and also because you have come from convention to regeneration on the farm and within your own self. So for you to speak to that, I think would be really powerful and enlightening.
Yeah, I think one thing that cancer has given me, actually most of it's been positive. It's a weird thing to say, but it's given me so much because I've been open to it as well. Realising that I am the cancer was massive for me. But I think it's also given me the ability to talk to people from a place of compassion, because I'm not angry at people who use glyphosate. I'm benefit of the doubt, and also people can only act to their level of awareness. And it's incredible, the marketing behind this stuff and how it became so popular. And the shikime pathway thing is a very believable story, you know, and we all want to believe it as well, especially with the price of labour at the moment. You know, what is the alternative? Like, this is a miracle chemical that when you strip it back, it's just too good to be true. It's a weird concept, you know. But you imagine being a farmer who was given land after World War II or something, and you've cleared all this land, and then the weeds are growing, and your neighbour is just growing these booming crops of whatever they're growing. And it's because the salesperson has rocked up and told them all these positives about glyphosate. As if you're not going to do it, they're making money. And so it takes off so quickly. But you can't blame farmers for that. They're under a lot of pressure. They're the most important people in our lives. I don't think they get the respect that they deserve. And I'd heard a saying a while ago that you need a good farmer 3 times a day, and hopefully just a doctor every now and then. You know, they're the ones feeding us, and they're the ones putting it all on the line, risking the elements.
Every day.
Every day, yeah, to feed us, and then you go to the supermarket, eat half of it, chuck it in the bin. I don't know, it'd be a bit demoralising.
It is.
For sure.
It is. That's what I saw when I was out there. Like, we've lost that connection to food, that reverence for the sacred, and in the process we've kind of given farmers the hardest path. It is the most noble pursuit. It's the hardest job in the world, but we don't acknowledge them. We give them a hard time. And this is why I'm really strong on this point around not pointing fingers, because, well, I think I said it to one of our guests earlier in the piece when we were travelling around Australia. I met a farmer that had a T-shirt, and on the back of it said, "I'm a farmer and I'm not trying to kill you." And that just spoke so loudly to me about the perception of farming from a populace, that's how he feels. And he was brave enough to wear that on his back. But how sad is that the people that we need, that fuel us, give us the nutrients that we need. We know the story that we're probably not optimising that at this current, but that's how they feel. That was shocking. And I think that's why it seems so important to be inclusive and everyone at the table on this pathway that we're on, of creating beautiful awareness about possibility and transition away from what it seems to me is a bit of a corporate story that we got told.
Yeah, and this discussion that we're having is sort of threatening a little bit to their livelihood. You know, how can they farm without this thing is the questions that they're asking. And that video that I put up on Instagram, one of the most telling messages for me was from a farmer's wife. And she wrote saying, "I'm the wife of a farmer, my husband has cancer, and my son who works on our farm also has cancer, and I can't talk about the herbicides that we're spraying." So she couldn't even bring it up because, then you got to ask yourself, why can't she talk to them about it? And it's because it would mean such massive change for those guys in their lives. And they're already going through whatever treatment they're going through for cancer, plus the psychological trauma of being diagnosed with cancer, carrying cancer around. So it's really hard for them. How are they meant to manage more change to try and get rid of possibly the things that cause their cancer? It's such a hard one as well. And I think maybe this is why, because, there are holes in my story, I'm not going to lie, about the relationship between glyphosate and my cancer. But it was all around that time. He gave me a timeline. I was swagging on the ground where the glyphosate was sprayed, and then the main thing, the rash and the amino acids and what that does to those pathways. It all just lined up, and then when you dive down, I think a story that people listening could probably relate to try and break it down so we can understand what's going on in the world right now to do with this herbicide, is relating it to cigarettes. So in the 1920s, that was when they first suspected cigarettes of causing lung cancer, and it was only in the 1970s that they acknowledged it, and it was 7,000 peer-reviewed papers that were needed to do that. And now glyphosate is at around 500 peer-reviewed papers. There's a massive amount of research out there. But I always imagine in the early days of cigarettes causing cancer, if we had podcasts and we could actually talk to the researchers in the early 1930s. Imagine how many lives that would have saved, because if we could get that podcast out for them to listen to, they'd be like, oh, well, I better not smoke anymore. They could have made the decisions for themselves, but it was an argument between, well, we had to wait 50 years for that to happen. So how many more peer-reviewed research papers do we need for us to start acknowledging the fact that glyphosate is doing this? And the correlation studies, I know correlation doesn't mean causation. That's everyone's big argument with that. But they measure correlation from -1 to +1, +1 being the highest. And a research paper Stephanie Seneff sent me just the other week, and colorectal cancer and the use of glyphosate in America was at 0.98 in a correlation study. And then there's about 20 other diseases, all above 0.7, relating to the use of these herbicides.
We unpacked this a little bit with Brett Wisner as well. I mean, he's the guy that took Monsanto to court, and it was adjudged that it caused non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And he said pretty directly that we know that it's causing harm on a lot of other of our systemic challenge, biological challenges, but we just maybe don't have the evidence in court, because that when that came out, that was the permission slip for others to say, what about me? What about me?
Yeah.
What about me? Here's another permission slip granted through the conversation with you, and in essence, what you're saying is, how many flags do we have to wave before this comes under more scrutiny? And the powers or the institutions and the people that create policy, how many conversations do we have to have before that is brought and changed? These people are meant to be protecting us from harm. And I don't really, from the conversations I've had, I'm not seeing that happening. So
Money.
Ringing the bell.
Yeah. Yeah, we really need to. We can't wait that long, because like cigarettes, you smoke one a week, you might be all right. You smoke one a day, your chances go up. You smoke 10 a day, your chances go up. At the moment, we are smoking a packet a day of herbicides, but it's not by our choice.
No, that's the difference with this story, right? Is because it doesn't matter who you are and what you do, you're still unconsciously being exposed.
It's a really scary part of it.
So, hope. Do we have any? Let's instill some of that into the beautiful people that are tuning into this conversation.
Yeah.
We've taken them on quite the journey. It's triggering and it's challenging, but I get the sense that there's an awakening happening, and we're just at the precipice of that unfolding. So how does that resonate with you?
What gave me hope is, not long ago I went to a screening of a regenerative ag movie in McLaren Vale, and we all gathered in the hall and watched this movie, and we were just the feeling in the room was incredible afterwards. And we were having heated discussions, but there was just this overall feeling of power between the people who were growing. And we're growing grapes, it's not food as well. But it made me want to drink wine too, just because of the energy that it created, because people were passionate about the way that they were farming and they were caring about the soil. So the main thing, and I've decided now with our wines, we're not going to be making Kangaroo Island wines anymore. We're going to start making McLaren Vale wines. It's because what I really crave is the community. I just want that connection and that energy. And I think I missed it before, but it's one thing that I would recommend to any cancer patient, or it's just anybody in general, like get around each other, because the human energy is just so powerful and so healing. Cancer is a cell that doesn't have the ability to communicate with the rest of the body. So it simply replicates itself. And it seems like at the moment, us humans, we are just replicating ourselves. We're becoming disconnected from the rest of the body, which is the earth. And we need to get that back. We need that connection. But of course, as soon as we let that happen, it's just going to flow, you know. It's called Mother Nature for a reason. It's not Father Nature. Mothers want to nurture, they care, they look after you, and we are its children, I guess. So that's my message of hope. Just put yourselves out there in the arms of your community and Mother Nature, and the future is bright.
It's bright with you being in it, my friend.
I'm glad I'm still in it. That's for sure.
I look forward to watching the unfolding of this incredible journey that you're on, and thank you for the humility, the courage that you bring, the presence that you offer, and what I'm hearing is the wisdom that you are sharing on this journey of life together, this incredible journey of discovery that we get to do. And I think what you said is why we're bringing this podcast to life, and this greater campaign around agrochemicals and glyphosate is we need the change to happen, but we can't do it alone. We've got to do it together. We've got to come back into communion and collaboration and communication with each other and with Mother Nature. And this is the invitation.
Yeah, we've got to have those hard conversations, and they got to come from a place of compassion for each other, not anger. If I ever have a conversation with anybody about this stuff, I'm not going to try and change you. I can't change anybody. All I'm going to do is talk about it, but I just want everybody to know, and I know that you guys at Farmer's Footprint, it's all coming from a place of love and compassion for life.
Yeah, look, we see what's possible in the world, and what we've come to learn is that awareness precedes change. So this is the ringing of the bell.
Let's do it.
Thank you so much for sitting with me today. It's such an honour to have you present here, and may this be the start of many conversations, and big love to your family and to you.
Thanks so much. This is really energizing me.
Duggie, love you, mate.
Love you too.
See you soon. Wow, what an incredible story that we're witnessing unfolding. Thank you, Nick or Duggie, for your brevity, for your honesty, for being a guiding light as to how we can change and what we need to do to bring that change. You've been listening to Invisible Ingredient. I'm Blair Beattie. Thanks for listening. Thank you for your support. And please, if this story resonates with you, share with those around you. And we'll see you next time.